On the evening of November 11, 1969, 20-year-old Joyce Malecki made a routine call to her boyfriend from the Harundale Mall in Glen Burnie, Maryland. She had just finished Christmas shopping and was excited to pick him up from nearby Fort Meade for their date. Her voice carried no hint of fear or concern as she promised to arrive within 15 minutes. She never made it. 2 days later, deer hunters discovered Joyce's lifeless body on the banks of the Little Patuxent River. The promising young office clerk had been sexually assaulted, stabbed, bludgeoned, and strangled to death. Her hands were bound behind her back with knapsack cord, and evidence suggested she had fought desperately against her attacker. What transformed a simple shopping trip into a nightmare of violence? Who targeted this beloved daughter, sister, and parishioner? And why does this 54-year-old murder continue to haunt investigators and her family to this day? Before we dive into this case, make sure to like this video and subscribe. This is a story that will stay with you long after it ends. Joyce Malecki's murder would become entangled with one of the most disturbing scandals in Catholic Church history, revealing connections that stretch far beyond a single tragic death. The hunt for Joyce's killer has never ended. Joyce Helen Malecki was born on June 12, 1949, into a loving Polish-American Catholic family in Baltimore County, Maryland. The daughter of Casimir Patrick and Doris Marion Malecki, Joyce grew up on Laverne Avenue in Lansdowne with her 4 brothers, Pat, Donald, Michael, and Darrell, and her sister, Darlene. The tight-knit family regularly attended Mass at St. Clement Roman Catholic Church, where their faith formed the cornerstone of their lives. By November 1969, Joyce had blossomed into a vivacious 20-year-old with an infectious smile and compassionate heart. She worked as a credit control administrator at Key Wine and Liquor Company, a Southwest Baltimore distribution firm, where colleagues knew her for treating everyone with kindness and respect. Her family-oriented nature made her the type of person who always put others first, whether helping her parents around the house or supporting her siblings through their challenges. Romance had recently entered Joyce's life in the form of James Gault, a soldier stationed at Fort Meade. They had been dating for approximately 7 weeks, and their relationship was blossoming into something serious. Joyce's family approved of the respectful young man who clearly cared deeply for their daughter. Tuesday, November 11, 1969, started as an ordinary day. With the holiday season approaching, Joyce asked her parents if she could borrow their 1967 Chevrolet Impala to do some early Christmas shopping at the Harundale Mall in Glen Burnie. She had planned to browse the stores, purchase some gifts, and then drive to Fort Meade to pick up James for their evening date. Her parents readily agreed, and Joyce left home wearing a green jacket, brown turtleneck sweater, and plaid slacks. The last family member to speak with Joyce was her 17-year-old brother Darrell. Their conversation was routine and cheerful, with Joyce expressing excitement about her shopping plans and her upcoming date with James. Nothing in her demeanor suggested any concern or premonition of danger. At approximately 9:45 p.m., Joyce called James from a payphone at the Harundale Mall. Her voice was bright and animated as she told him she had finished shopping and was on her way to collect him from Fort Meade. She estimated she would arrive within 15 minutes, and her overall demeanor conveyed no sense of trouble or anxiety. It was a brief, loving conversation between 2 young people looking forward to spending time together. James waited at Fort Meade until midnight, growing increasingly worried as the hours passed without any sign of Joyce. He knew her to be punctual and reliable. Disappearing without explanation was completely out of character. When she still hadn't arrived by midnight, he reluctantly returned to his barracks, assuming something unexpected had delayed her and that she would contact him the following morning. Back at the Malecki family home, Joyce's parents weren't immediately alarmed when she didn't return that evening. They assumed she had decided to spend the night with a female friend after her date, which wasn't unusual for a young woman her age. The family went to bed expecting to hear from Joyce the next morning with details about her evening. But morning came without any word from their beloved daughter, and a routine shopping trip was about to transform into every parent's worst nightmare. When Joyce failed to return home or contact her family by Wednesday morning, November 12th, her parents' concern escalated to genuine alarm. This behavior was completely unlike their responsible daughter, who always kept her family informed of her whereabouts. Within hours of realizing something was seriously wrong, the Malecki family reported Joyce missing to local authorities. The initial police response was swift, but revealed immediately troubling developments. Approximately 2 hours after Joyce was reported missing, one of her older brothers drove to Fort Meade to speak directly with James Galt. The conversation confirmed their worst fears. Joyce had never arrived at the military base the previous evening, despite her promise to be there within 15 minutes of her phone call. The breakthrough came as Joyce's brother drove home from Fort Meade. Traveling along the route Joyce would have taken, he spotted the family's 1967 Chevrolet Impala parked approximately 10 feet from a phone booth in front of the Vegas Club in Odenton. The discovery sent chills through the family. The keys were still in the ignition, Joyce's driving glasses lay on the dashboard, and her purchases from the Harundale Mall remained on one of the passenger seats. Most disturbing of all were the human bloodstains visible on the rear seat of the vehicle. This physical evidence transformed what had been a missing person case into a likely abduction and assault. The scene suggested Joyce had been forcibly removed from the car, possibly after being injured in a struggle with her attacker. Law enforcement immediately secured the vehicle as a crime scene and began processing it for evidence. The location where the car was found, between the Harundale Mall and Fort Meade, indicated that Joyce had been intercepted somewhere along her planned route to pick up her boyfriend. The abandoned car represented the last known trace of Joyce's movements. FBI agents joined local police in the investigation, recognizing the serious nature of the case. The evidence suggested an abduction that had likely escalated to violence, given the blood found in the vehicle. Investigators began canvassing the area around the Vegas Club, interviewing potential witnesses who might have seen anything suspicious the previous evening. The timing of Joyce's disappearance created additional concern for investigators. Just 4 days earlier, on November 7th, Sister Catherine Cesnik had vanished from nearby Baltimore. The Catholic nun and teacher had also been shopping before her disappearance, and her car had been found abandoned with keys in the ignition. While no direct connection could be established between the cases, the similarities were troubling enough to warrant consideration. Federal authorities took the lead in Joyce's case due to the proximity to Fort Meade, a federal military installation. FBI agents began constructing a timeline of Joyce's final hours and identifying everyone who had contact with her that day. The investigation was about to intensify dramatically as the search for Joyce expanded across multiple jurisdictions. The race against time to find Joyce alive was already becoming a hunt for her killer. The breakthrough in Joyce Malecki's case came in the most tragic way possible. On the morning of November 13, 1969, 2 deer hunters were scouting locations to construct a hunting blind on the western perimeter of Fort Meade's Soldier Park training area. As they explored the wooded terrain near the Little Patuxent River, they made a horrifying discovery that would answer the question of what had happened to Joyce, while raising countless new questions about who was responsible. Joyce's body was found partially submerged on the bank of the Little Patuxent River, lying face down in the shallow water. She was fully clothed except for her shoes, which were discovered nearby on the riverbank. Most chilling of all, her hands were bound behind her back with knapsack cord, clear evidence that she had been the victim of a calculated, violent crime. FBI agents and military police immediately secured the crime scene, recognizing they were dealing with a homicide that had occurred on federal property. The location itself told a disturbing story. An examination revealed no footprints or signs of a struggle at the river site, indicating that Joyce's murder had taken place elsewhere. Her body had been transported to this remote location and thrown over a 6-foot embankment, where it had rolled down into the river. The positioning and condition of Joyce's remains suggested her killer had chosen this location specifically to conceal evidence and delay discovery. The remote area within Fort Meade's training grounds was rarely visited except by military personnel and occasional hunters, making it an ideal dumping ground for someone familiar with the base's layout. Joyce's body was transported to the Baltimore City morgue, where Dr. Isidore Michalakis performed the autopsy on November 14th. His findings painted a horrific picture of Joyce's final hours. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation, but the examination revealed she had endured far more than just the fatal assault. Dr. Michalakis found clear evidence that Joyce had been sexually assaulted prior to her death. Her face, forehead, and body bore numerous scratches, bruises, and abrasions, indicating she had fought desperately against her attacker. Most telling were the skin and flesh scrapings discovered beneath her fingernails, physical evidence that Joyce had clawed at her assailant in a valiant attempt to defend herself or escape. The autopsy also revealed 15 superficial knife cuts to Joyce's neck, along with one deeper knife wound to her throat. While this deeper wound was serious, it was not sufficient to cause death. The pattern of injuries suggested prolonged torture and assault before the final act of strangulation. The knapsack cord used to bind her wrists remained knotted behind her back, with a section of loose cord between the binding ends. Perhaps most significantly, the medical examination confirmed that Joyce had most likely been deceased when her body was placed in the river. This meant her killer had murdered her at another location, then transported her body to the Fort Meade site for disposal. The crime demonstrated planning and knowledge of the area that suggested either military connections or familiarity with the base's remote sections. The forensic evidence painted a picture of a predator who had targeted Joyce specifically, overpowered her despite her fierce resistance, and then methodically disposed of her body in a location designed to conceal the crime. The FBI assigned 10 agents to investigate Joyce Malecki's murder, treating it as a priority case due to both its heinous nature and its occurrence on federal property. Special Agent Edwin Raymond Tooley, who oversaw the Baltimore field office, publicly stated that investigators had identified several suspects and were pursuing multiple leads. However, despite the initial optimism and extensive resources devoted to the case, every avenue of investigation ultimately led to dead ends. The similarities between Joyce's murder and Sister Catherine Cesnik's disappearance 4 days earlier created immediate speculation about a possible connection. Both women had been shopping at the Harundale Mall before their abductions, both were of similar build and appearance, and both of their vehicles were found abandoned with keys still in the ignition. The proximity in time and location seemed too coincidental to ignore. However, while investigators explored potential links between the cases, they could not establish any concrete evidence connecting the crimes. The FBI remained cautious about definitively linking the murders, though they acknowledged the troubling similarities warranted continued investigation of possible connections. A jurisdictional controversy emerged that would ultimately hamper the investigation for decades. While Joyce's body was discovered on federal property, making it initially an FBI case, confusion arose about which agency maintained primary responsibility. The FBI later claimed they had delegated authority to the Anne Arundel County Police Department upon determining it was not a federal issue. However, Anne Arundel County Police insisted the case was never fully transferred to them, leaving them believing they were only providing assistance rather than leading the investigation. This bureaucratic confusion had devastating consequences. Without clear authority and communication between agencies, crucial evidence may have been lost or overlooked, witness interviews may have been incomplete, and investigative momentum was certainly compromised. The case gradually went cold as leads dried up, and administrative uncertainty prevented sustained focus on solving Joyce's murder. The breakthrough that would eventually shed new light on Joyce's case came 25 years later, in 1994, when 2 former students of Archbishop Keough High School filed a lawsuit alleging sexual abuse by Father Joseph Maskell. This development created a potential connection between Joyce's murder and a broader pattern of criminal activity within the Baltimore Catholic community. Father Maskell had served as priest at St. Clement Roman Catholic Church, where the Malecki family worshipped, between 1966 and 1968. He also worked as a counselor and chaplain at Archbishop Keogh High School and served as a military chaplain at Fort Meade, giving him access to all the key locations connected to Joyce's murder and the disappearance of Sister Catherine Cesnik. Joyce's family members revealed that she had known Father Maskell through their church and had harbored a strong dislike for him. She had even warned family and friends to stay away from him, suggesting she may have been aware of inappropriate behavior. While Joyce had attended a week-long religious retreat where Maskell served as spiritual advisor, there was no evidence she had been one of his abuse victims. The revelation that Maskell had connections to multiple victims and locations raised disturbing questions about whether Joyce's murder was connected to the systematic abuse occurring within Catholic institutions. Her strong dislike for Maskell and her warnings to others suggested she may have possessed knowledge about his activities that made her a threat to his continued predation. Father Maskell was removed from the priesthood in 1992 following additional abuse allegations and subsequently fled the country. He died of natural causes in 2001 at age 62, escaping justice for his documented crimes and any potential involvement in Joyce's murder. More than 5 decades after Joyce Malecki's murder, the case officially remains unsolved, but recent developments have brought renewed hope for justice and closure for her surviving family members. The passage of time has created both obstacles and opportunities in the ongoing pursuit of her killer. In 2017, the Netflix documentary series The Keepers brought international attention to both Joyce's murder and the connected case of Sister Catherine Cesnik. The series explored the potential links between these crimes and the systematic sexual abuse that occurred within Baltimore Catholic institutions during the 1960s and 1970s. This renewed public interest generated new leads and encouraged witnesses to come forward with information that had been suppressed for decades. The Baltimore County Police Department responded to this renewed interest by reopening the investigation into Sister Catherine Cesnik's murder while also reviewing possible connections to Joyce's case. However, the FBI remains the lead agency investigating Joyce's murder, though some evidence from the original 1969 investigation is believed to have been lost over the intervening decades. On December 14, 2023, the FBI took the extraordinary step of exhuming Joyce's body with her family's consent. This decision represented a significant development in the case, as advances in DNA technology now allow for evidence extraction and analysis that was impossible in 1969. The exhumation was conducted privately, though Joyce's surviving relatives were allowed to be present for this emotional procedure. Following the examination, Joyce's body was placed in a new coffin and reinterred in the same grave at Loudon Park Cemetery. The FBI declined to comment on the specific results or findings from the exhumation, citing respect for the ongoing investigation. However, the decision to pursue this costly and complex procedure suggests investigators believe they have viable suspects whose DNA could be compared against any evidence recovered. The case has also contributed to broader conversations about institutional accountability and the protection of abuse victims. Joyce's murder, potentially connected to efforts to silence those who threaten to expose Catholic Church scandals, represents the extreme lengths to which some individuals would go to protect institutional secrets. Kurt Wolfgang, executive director of the Maryland Crime Victims Resource Center, emphasized the lasting impact of Joyce's murder on her family, stating that even 54 years later, achieving justice would provide crucial closure for those who loved her. Her surviving relatives continue to hope that advances in forensic science and renewed investigative efforts will finally identify her killer. The case has influenced other investigations as well. DNA profiling and forensic genealogy have recently solved 2 other Baltimore area murders from the same era, those of Pamela Lynn Conyers in 1970 and Heather Ann Porter in 1981. These successes demonstrate that even decades-old cases can yield to modern investigative techniques. Joyce's murder remains a testament to the importance of never giving up on seeking justice, regardless of how much time has passed. The murder of Joyce Malecki represents more than just an unsolved crime. It stands as a symbol of institutional failure, bureaucratic confusion, and the devastating consequences when justice is delayed or denied. Her death occurred at the intersection of multiple scandals that would ultimately expose corruption within some of Baltimore's most trusted institutions. What makes Joyce's case particularly tragic is how her murder appears to be connected to her moral courage. Her documented dislike of Father Maskell and her warnings to others to stay away from him suggest she may have recognized dangerous behavior that others preferred to ignore. If Joyce died because she threatened to expose abuse or corruption, then her murder represents the silencing of a young woman who was trying to protect others from harm. The jurisdictional confusion that hampered the original investigation serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of clear authority and communication in criminal cases. The failure of federal and local agencies to coordinate effectively may have allowed crucial evidence to be lost and enabled Joyce's killer to escape justice for more than 5 decades. However, Joyce's story also demonstrates the power of persistence and the potential for justice delayed but not denied. The 2023 exhumation of her body shows that advances in forensic science can breathe new life into even the oldest cases. DNA technology that didn't exist in 1969 now offers hope for finally identifying her killer. The recent successful resolution of similar Baltimore area cold cases proves that time alone does not make crimes unsolvable. The identification of Pamela Lynn Conyers and Heather Ann Porter's killers through genetic genealogy shows that modern investigative techniques can reach back decades to deliver justice. Joyce Malecki deserved far better than the abbreviated life she received and the decades of mystery that followed her death. Her family deserves answers about what happened to their beloved daughter and sister. The community deserves to know that those who commit such heinous crimes will ultimately be held accountable. If this case moved you, please like this video and subscribe for more investigative stories. Share your thoughts in the comments below. How can we ensure that cases like Joyce's never go cold again? Her memory demands that we never stop seeking the truth, no matter how much time has passed or how powerful the forces that seek to conceal it.